What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. There has been a metric ton of stuff dumped onto the WoW community with the announcement of patch 9.15, which has honestly the most content and changes I've really ever seen in a 0.05 patch, as those are generally known for just being small tweaks and some quality of life things here and there. This is probably for a myriad of reasons, some maybe more obvious than others, but regardless, we're getting some pretty big changes in the coming months of Shadowlands. For myself and probably many other folks, one of the big things on the horizon is changes being made to the target cap, which was of course one of the most positive and well-received and best changes made during the Shadowlands pre-patch, right? Anyways, from the way it's worded on the Blizzard post discussing this change, AoE abilities affected by this will now be able to hit as many targets as are available, but they will deal reduced damage. This blue post also mentions that reduced damage begins after 5 targets, which is a little unusual and could technically mean some changes to quite a few of our abilities. For Assassination rogues, this means both Fan of Knives and Crimson Tempest will be able to strike all targets nearby, but targets beyond the first 5 will take reduced damage, unlike on live servers where we can currently strike up to 8 for full damage. The same goes for Subtlety, with Shuriken Storm and Black Powder dealing their normal damage on up to 5 targets instead of 8 like they currently do, but they'll be able to strike additional targets for reduced damage. This also applies to the Secret Technique talent, which currently hits up to 6 normally on live servers, although it already has some weird reduced damage scaling impacts on it. Again, if I'm looking at this blue post as the set in stone, this is how it's going to be for abilities and how they'll work in 9.15, it looks like several of these moves are gonna kind of be nerfed a little bit if you're looking at the 6 to 8 target range where these abilities are already at their maximum. So we're just gonna have to wait and see how that all works out. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they set all of these AoE abilities to 5 targets, because then they can kind of balance around 5 targets with this reduced damage AoE cap thing that they're adding in, so we'll see. Oh, and how could I forget Outlaw, my most favorite spec ever, as you all know. Oh man, I'm just so happy and enthusiastic and joyous about all the great changes coming to Outlaw and how it'll be able to slap the heck out of things with tons and tons of Blade Flurry damage. That's what I would be saying if there were any changes currently announced for Outlaw. Yeah, I will be talking about that a bit in this video, so the most I can say as of right now is don't panic and jump ship just yet if you're an Outlaw main, as I can't imagine Blizzard blatantly and completely ignoring Outlaw Rogue, especially with the target cap and especially with how popular it is in Mythic Plus. Anyways, to me the most important part to talk about with these target cap changes is how it can potentially affect each spec and class representation in Mythic Plus. I don't imagine these changes influencing raid or raided PvP or whatever too much unless they decide to add like a 30 target raid boss fight or something silly, though I guess it will make doing old content and Torghast and world content a little easier. However, there are a few things that need to get pointed out first before we dissect what the target cap changes like this can do for us potentially. One, and this is definitely the biggest takeaway from this video, I'm pretty sure no one knows exactly how much damage is quote-unquote reduced damage when hitting more than 5 enemies. For all we know, it's like 10% of the original damage of the move or something really unimpressive and it won't matter. Or maybe it's like 50 to 60% and it'll make melee the absurdly dominant DPSers in Mythic Plus again. As far as I've seen, none of this is even on the PTR yet, but it might be by the time this video is edited and put up on YouTube and whatnot, so if so, I will be doing some testing and just talking about that stuff in another video later. 2, it's very possible some tuning will be done to abilities and classes and specs once these target cap alterations are in place. A lot of moves, especially for rogues, have quite a bit of benefit outside of just dealing more damage when you hit more things. I know a bit about other classes too, but it's hard to say how much or how little the target cap will affect certain specs and all that, so I'd really be recommending just to be mindful of the implications this change can have across the many classes and specs out there, and how it can and potentially will affect group composition in dungeons, and the way dungeons are even pulled and stuff like that. And 3, Outlaw is really up in the air right now, as I mentioned earlier, so I can't really elaborate too much of how great or terrible the changes are, since there aren't any. Blizzard has been virtually silent on the numerous comments, tweets, forum posts, carrier pigeons, smoke signals, and hastily written notes attached to bricks that I and plenty of other rogues have sent their way. And to me that is potentially a good thing and would be very typical of Blizzard, as it probably means that they're in the stages of trying to find a solution for Outlaw and the way Blade Flurry works, and they haven't come up with anything they want to put out there for everybody to know about, so instead of changing stuff midway through the PTR, they just aren't gonna let us know about anything at all yet. I'm sure most of you know, but for those who don't, Outlaw's AoE is basically 99% thanks to one ability, Blade Flurry. This mini cooldown makes all of our single target attacks have 40% of the damage dealt radiated on up to 4 nearby enemies. So the problem I can foresee, and this is entirely speculation mind you, is that they don't quite have an easy way to make a percentage of the already percentage-based damage of Blade Flurry. And even if they do figure out a way to do it, it's possible that the damage past 5 targets could become negligible at best. This could of course be remedied by just increasing the amount of damage that Blade Flurry radiates out in the first place from 40% to say 60-65ish%, which would still give Outlaw a really strong niche at the sub 5 target range where it can cleave really well, even if its extra target damage past 5 targets isn't all that great. But there is another less obvious issue for Outlaw. The spec doesn't really have any true benefits from hitting extra targets, other than just dealing more damage. There are no passive benefits or anything that improves anything about Outlaw when you're hitting 3 targets or 5 or 15 if the target cap was altered, unlike both Subtlety and Assassination. And that kind of brings me into the other points I wanted to discuss in this video about the other 2 specs of Rogue, and that's the gains that can be had from the change to the target cap, even if we don't know exactly how much damage is going to be beyond 5 targets. Subtlety has probably the most noticeable and obvious damage gains to be had from a relaxed target cap with how Shuriken Storm, Find Weakness, Black Powder, and the Finality legendary work together. Shuriken Storm gives a combo point for every enemy hit, which is why Subtlety is so strong for funneling AoE pulls into tons of eviscerates for big single target priority damage, or just blowing up tons of Black Powders around and having basically a 2-button AoE rotation. Of course, you can only have 6 combo points at a time with deeper stratagem, so Shuriken Storm's combo point generation potential is already easily attainable in current tuning. However, any Shuriken Storm critical hits will apply Find Weakness, which means if you have 15 targets around you, you'll have a pretty high chance of getting a lot of Find Weaknesses out on all these enemies all at once. And every time you throw out a Shuriken Storm, or even just with the Shuriken Tornado talent spamming the storms for you. This in turn means Black Powder will be taking advantage of that 40% bonus shadow damage, which hits all targets around you with Find Weakness, as that is not touched by the target cap. Even in current 9.1 tuning, if you hit Shuriken Storm on, say, 20 enemies, and if eventually you can get 10-12 of them to have Find Weakness at the same time, then your Black Powders will be dealing that shadow damage bonus to all of them, even though Shuriken Storm and Black Powder only hit 8 technically. And then of course you have the Finality legendary, which gives a solid damage gain in both single target and AoE, as your second use of the same finisher deals 25% extra damage. So this all just compiles and snowballs into a ton of damage and a big spreading of Find Weakness, which in itself is a big DPS gain because that means you're bypassing even more armor of your opponents. For Assassination, the gains of a relaxed target cap are a bit less apparent. With Fan of Knives being able to hit 1 billion targets or whatever, that is pretty great, as it means we're going to have a lot more deadly poisons out on more targets with basically every GCD we use it. And Crimson Tempest is a big part of our AoE damage, so obviously more bleeds are good bleeds. The really nice thing about this change, however, is the impact it's going to have on the Seal Fate passive. Fan of Knives can individually crit each enemy that's hit by it, and whenever we get a crit with a combo point generator, we get 1 additional combo point. This in turn means we will now have even more chances per Fan of Knives cast to get Seal Fate procs, and if you're making good sized pulls, that means you can be filling up all your combo points with every hit. Even if you're not pulling like it's the MDI or anything crazy, this is still a ton of extra chances to fill up on combo points every time we use the ability, which we can then dump into Crimson Tempests and Ruptures as needed. This will also very likely make the lethal poisons and poisoned Qatar conduits even stronger for multi-target situations, since we're going to get a lot more poisons out with every Fan of Knives casts, and those Fan of Knives casts are going to be hitting even more enemies and dealing even more damage. Again, a lot of this is speculation and really depends on how much they plan on chunking the damage once you're hitting more than 5 targets. It's also potentially really lame if they decide to reduce Fan of Knives, Black Powder, Shuriken Storm, and Crimson Tempest all down to a base value of 5 targets hit, because it can inadvertently mean we'll be dealing a bit less damage in the 6 to 8 target range than we're able to currently. Again, a lot of this is up in the air and will require testing and actually seeing how and what they plan to do, since this still isn't even on the PTR to mess around with yet. And then of course there's also the elephant in the room of what the heck they're gonna do with Outlaw and abilities like Blade Flurry and even Killing Spree, as we've still yet to hear a peep out of the development team on design intentions and what to expect for Outlaw. I'm still optimistic that some good decisions can and will be made, but with the sheer benefits that Assassination and especially Subtlety are going to receive from this target cap change in comparison, I can't say how competitive Outlaw is going to remain in Mythic Plus. It's already pretty heavily outclassed in AoE damage, and the niche benefit of funneling priority damage that Subtlety can put out is pretty important. Though in low target cleave situations, Outlaw is still able to hold its own very well. The meta around Mythic Plus can potentially be seeing some big changes with how many classes are going to be influenced by the target cap, and if mega-sized pulls become the norm, then it would be very hard to see a Mythic Plus comp that Outlaw offers anything greater than what Subtlety and probably even Assassination might be able to dish out. I'm no doomsayer by any means, so please understand this is all just my viewpoint and the criticisms that I can see from our limited scope of this pretty big change. For now though, I'll be waiting for a nice and spicy PTR build with all the stuff included so I can test it and show y'all what we might be looking for at the future of Shadowlands and potentially beyond. I hope this little video was interesting for you folks. I don't normally do just talking and analysis videos like this for changes in the game since I'm more into making guides to help people, but this has been a topic that's been itching in my brain ever since I was out of town for a couple weeks when these announcements came out from Blizzard. If you did enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or maybe even poking around the rest of the channel if you want. I try to cover quite a lot of WoW related things, so I might have some other useful stuff for you. And as always, my appreciation and gratitude to all of my viewers and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.